I know that the Orthodox are in schism, but it's not been made clear at all that the SSPX are in schism. Isn't it the Church's responsibility to be really clear about that?
I understand Catholicism to be universal. If at any point you draw a line and say this has ceased to be Catholic, that's where you cease to be Catholic.
Well, then what do you say to those who would draw that line around the SSPX and say, this isn't Catholic? They are planning on ordaining bishops without papal approval, not just without papal approval, but in direct opposition.
It's an inflammatory thing to say that will not go down very well, but to me it's just Protestantism.
How should we assess, just to sum it up, Pope Francis's pontificate? Can we just say it was a bloody mess and he was a terrible pope? Or is that inappropriate to say? Imagine if a Novus Ordo was implemented, and the Novus Ordo was as different from the Novus Ordo as the Novus Ordo is from the Latin Mass, and in the same direction. People would rightly lose their freaking minds.
Yeah, and I get very uneasy when people talk about leaving or joining the Novus Ordo, and they say, well, so-and-so's joined the Novus Ordo, this kind of thing. That's a Novus Ordo church, you know.
Why don't you like that? Your accent's just close enough to mine that I might end up sounding like you by the end of this.
Yeah, I find the Australian accent a little bit contagious, so
Do you?
you might find me saying good day and all sorts by the end of it. Let's see.
So, who are you, for those watching from home?
Well, my name's Jacob Phillips. I am a professor of systematic theology at a university in southwest London called St Mary's University, Twickenham. So I'm a Catholic theologian, a dad, a husband, and I comment on bits and pieces to do with the church and contemporary culture here and there, sometimes outside the academic sphere, if I feel so called, which I do on occasion.
I first came across you, Catholics Unscripted?
That's right, yep.
It turns out, they don't know this, but I guess I poach all my guests from them because I saw Kwasniewski on there. I'm like, hey, he's terrific. Had to have him on. Same thing with you. So it was good to have you on because I feel like you're touching upon something that I'm half thinking about all of the time as well. Namely, what does it look like today to be a Catholic, and how are we to understand, like it feels like there's a lot of chaos in the church.
Yeah.
And we talked about this earlier. We're roughly the same age. So, And when did you come into the church? 2008?
2008, yeah.
Yes. Okay. Yeah. So for me, I converted when I was 17. And just the feeling, at least for me, I know that there were trads who were, that's disparaging. There were trads who had concerns that I didn't even know about at the time.
Yeah.
But for me, it was like, John Paul II, he's the man. And, so I just started to learn about the beauty of sexuality because the theology of the body and things like that. And then Benedict came in and just felt like we were chugging along, Yeah. And then he kind of let some of the Anglicans come in through the ordinariate and then Francis came in and it just felt, and I don't know if it was a combination between to put it charitably, very confusing Pope and social media exploding and everyone having their own platform or what it was, but it just felt like at some point the wheels fell off and the game was different.
Yeah.
Did you feel that?
Yeah, my experience was very similar. Well, I came in during the papacy of Benedict XVI, and there was a very real sense that this was the bark of Peter. This was a place of clarity. This was a place of truth. This was not full of ambiguity and warring factions, although when there were disagreements, you knew what the authoritative voice was. There was clarity, even though some may disagree. And I don't feel that represents the way the church has been since the Francis years, or certainly during the Francis years, when that sense of clarity was really, really questioned in a way that many of us found very difficult to stomach and to deal with, myself included. I still hold firmly to the indefectibility of the church, and within what would be called in theology the hierarchy of truths, it's very clear that the solemn dogmas were not touched. The ordinary universal magisterium of the church wasn't touched, the infallible bit. But there was a real problem when you get a couple of grades down from that to what's called authoritative doctrine, which is not understood to be infallible, but it should be something of which we can feel certain, if not sure. That was Benedict XVI's phrase. You should always feel certain, if not sure, that this must be true. And that's the level of encyclicals, local bishops' conferences, etc., etc. And what we're called to do within the church at that level of doctrine, we don't have to believe in it with faith. It's not infallible. It's not revealed by God. But we are required, almost on autopilot, to have a hermeneutic of charity towards our leaders in the church, the shepherds of the flock to which we belong. And that hermeneutic of charity, for very understandable reasons, is something one does not see among believers in the way that one used to see it during Benedict XVI, John Paul II. That era seems to have gone. And there's completely the wrong attitude sometimes comes in, which is a hermeneutic of suspicion, which I understand. I do understand. But it's not really the Pope's job to convince you he's right. The starting point is the Pope is right. There are exceptional moments in history where there are problems with that level of doctrine. But it should never be the beginning of the conversation. Suspicion should never be the beginning of the conversation. It's the very unfortunate end in exceptional circumstances, not the norm.
Yeah. It feels like in all our institutions, something similar is taking place. I don't know what it's like in England, you can tell me, but here in America, like trust levels in mainstream media, the government is at an all-time low, is what they tell me, and I feel it. And so there is a sort of cynicism and like it would be naive to believe anything that we're being told. And I don't know. I mean, I'm only a Catholic. I don't know what it's like to be a Muslim or a Jew or whatever, but I would suspect in those I'd be surprised if there wasn't something like that taking place as well. Does that make sense? Like this might be a larger thing, not just a Catholic thing, but something that's taken place for a whole host of reasons. Part of me wonders if Pope Francis was never Pope and Benedict was still at the helm, was this inevitable? Does that make sense? Like Francis didn't do himself any favors.
Yeah, it does. And I think the thing about Francis, I mean, I withheld saying much when he was around, when he was in office. I took a slight vow of silence on it all, really, partly because I teach seminarians. And it's really hard for a young man to come forward and make that sacrifice of entering seminary and training for the priesthood in today's culture. It's an immensely difficult thing to do. The last thing they need is their theology lecturer placing further doubt in the church. So I was very careful, and thanks be to God, none of the issues touched upon my area, so I wasn't really called upon to comment professionally, or only very occasionally. The doctrine of the Trinity wasn't questioned. The doctrine of the person of Christ wasn't questioned.
Thank God.
No. But there were occasions when I would be asked my professional opinion. As a theologian, what do you think about fiducia supplicans, traditiones custodes, etc.? And what was really challenging is that what we weren't given in those years was the theological rationale. These were just given forth by fiat.
Yeah.
This is what's happening. This is what needs to be done. And this will be done. And some people questioned, what's the rationale here? What's the basis in Scripture? What's the basis in tradition? From the perspective of a hermeneutic of charity.
Yeah.
Saying, I'm with you. I want to think with you.
Yes.
I can't see where you're joining the dots, so could you explain? And as a theologian, we weren't given those explanations. So there was a certain measure of what I think we can say, I say as diplomatically as possible, would seem to have been the consequences of a certain obstinacy on the part of the personality at play.
Yeah, the Pope.
Yeah. A refusal to have to give a rationale even.
Yes.
Which meant that we didn't really know what we were saying. As a theologian, well, okay, why? Well, if you're not getting an answer as to why this needs to happen, and the great difficulty with that in the climate we're in, as you rightly say, is that we know everything a Pope has said. I mean, in a way, it was to have a personality who's outspoken, forthright, sometimes very funny. Some of the things he said made me laugh. But to have that kind of personality at this age where every single utterance of a Pope is worldwide within seconds.
Yeah.
I mean, God has a sense of humor. I don't know.
So I am really excited to tell you that I have partnered with Theotokos Rosaries. These are, without a doubt, the most beautiful rosaries I have ever seen in my life. If you're looking for a beautiful rosary that's also like an heirloom, something that you could have for life, check this out. Go to dailywire.com/shop and pick up one of these. This is more of the masculine one. This one they based on St. Peter's Basilica. So it has real stone beads and Italian olive wood. This one is inspired by Notre Dame in Lyon, France. Go to dailywire.com/shop to pick one up today. And thank you to Theotokos Rosaries for partnering with us. I mean, that wasn't even, it's interesting. When he was elected, I was sitting in the offices of Catholic Answers where I worked at the time. And we were all sitting around a television. And, you know, whereas today you'd be watching maybe some kind of streaming service.
Yeah.
And then I remember going into my office and just refreshing Wikipedia or the internet to see if anything had been updated. And it was like a couple of hours.
Yeah.
I mean, that's remarkable because today it's 1 million people are streaming and talking about it immediately. So even in his pontificate, the acceleration of technology and the immediacy of the news
completely
is impressive.
Yeah. And so, you know, maybe some of this would have happened anyway because there were these great big sort of worldly forces at play. And there is, as you mentioned rightly, what I'd call this crisis of authority, which is really deep, and it's happening across Western cultures, very, very deep. And things have happened in the cultures of the West, which have meant that people do not trust what were once seen as, on autopilot, as it were, the legitimate authorities. And when I say things have happened, I mean there were certain things around COVID which led lots of people to question what the messaging was and whether it was right. I think transgender ideology has done a massive amount of damage to the confidence in our official means of information, because people have looked at this and said, I can't square this circle, but everyone in authority is telling me that this circle is square.
Yes.
And then all hell breaks loose.
Yeah, no, totally. If the government are telling you that it's okay to cut your son's testicles off and call him Daphne, it's like, well, you can't be trusted for anything. If you don't know that, you can't know anything.
And not only is it okay, it's profoundly immoral to suggest it might have negative consequences.
Yeah. It's
profoundly immoral to do that. So the whole moral compass goes out the window. And then we're in this position where nobody knows what to believe and things get very, very difficult. And every era of history presents its own problems for the church. In the 19th century, it was the Labour movement, the late 19th century, left-wing politics, socialism, Marxism, revolutionary activism, which Leo XIII answered to with Catholic social teaching, and continued into the 20th century. We have this crisis of authority now, in Western cultures particularly. But I think it's really important to take a step back and ask the really deep questions here about authority for us as Catholics, for us as believers in God, in Christ. Because we're taught in the modern age that authority corrupts and power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. Well, the core contention of the Judeo-Christian worldview is that he who has absolute power is intrinsically incapable of corruption. Absolute power is absolute goodness. Now, if that's the anchor, that's the starting point for society, and all other forms of authority are somehow acting in a mediative or serving role towards an authority which we can be confident must be good and have a goodness which surpasses the most amazing goodness we could ever think of, then society one would hope it would hold together better. And what worries me about the church and the crisis of authority, the way it affects the church, is that people adopt that hermeneutic of suspicion, which is being given towards political leaders, often with good reason, and giving it towards the shepherds of the flock, and making it the starting point. You know, I'm not suggesting people shouldn't criticize the church. I'm not suggesting people shouldn't be open and honest about their doubts and pray and talk to their friends and all the rest of it, talk to the parish priest. But when that's the starting point, that your Catholic and the church has to convince you that it's true, something's gone very wrong. The starting point is always this is the church founded by Christ, organized by a divine mandate, anointed by the Spirit, in which and by which we live and move and have our being.
Isn't willful naivete something of a defect or a sin? In other words, I'm sure a lot of the problem lays on us, like the laity who decided we could get clicks. I mean, that's to put it cynically. I really don't think that was a majority of it. I think there was just a lot of people trying to figure out what the hell was going on. And there was an appetite to be helped, to be told what's going on. But it seems to me like some of the blame definitely lays at the foot of the Pope. And so if he's saying things that prima facie are scandalous, isn't it like a defect to choose to be, isn't it naive to just go, well, I can't start from a position of incredulity. Like, what do you do when you've got good reason to be incredulous or skeptical or?
Yeah, no, I understand that. And I as a Catholic, you can never ask people to sacrifice their intellect. We believe in reason. We believe that reason is largely unfallen and we can trust reason. And reason is questioning these sorts of things. I was asked to give a talk to a group of priests who were really struggling after Fiducia Supplicans about the different levels of magisterial teaching and how they function. And I found that research immensely helpful, because the top level of dogma, solemn pronouncement, ordinary and universal magisterium, those things which the Church has always held universally as revealed, even if they haven't been pronounced solemnly, things like the communion of saints, forgiveness of sins, resurrection of the body, none of that stuff was touched. So that's the starting point. That's the point of faith, the theological virtue of faith that we're given by God in the run-up and by virtue of our baptism. That's all untouched. The level of authoritative doctrine was where things got very difficult to maintain a hermeneutic of charity. I did feel that one was still called to have that hermeneutic of charity, even though one felt very confused and upset. So when Pope Francis did his final encyclical on the Sacred Heart, for example, I sat down to read it the most charitable and generous way I possibly could, because I felt that's what's required of us. It was okay, actually. I mean, I have a few minor grumbles, but, you know, it was pretty good.
Who's someone who you think did that well, like in the public sphere? Because that was a long enough pontificate. How long was he Pope for? 12 years or something?
Yeah, I felt like it.
Yeah, felt like a long time. Is there someone you like, they did that well? Because I remember for me, I kept thinking, am I being a coward in not just addressing this squarely? Or am I being prudent because what do I know anyway?
Yeah.
You know, especially like it seemed unreasonable to not address what was going on.
Yeah.
Because I had people write to me and they would say, just stick to the beauty of the faith. Don't get involved in this.
Yeah.
And I get that. Like, I see why they would say that. But when people are leaving the church because of this, or if they're being led down rabbit trails of certain other people online who might be telling them to commit some schismatic act, it's like, well, we have to try to say something. And so I would often have good people like Dr. Ralph Martin on, or others, to be like, help us pass this out, because we can't just pretend confusion isn't taking place. It'd be nice to pretend, but we can't, you know?
Yeah. I don't think there's any kind of easy answers here. I think it's about conscience. It's about prayer. And one would hope that those who are speaking out are doing it, you know, well-intentioned and in good faith, not just looking for clicks and engagement. You know, sometimes that one wonders how much that's the case. I think, and there's also, I mean, one doesn't want to seem in any way sort of deceptive, but there is something about airing your dirty linen in public as well. So you've got to think, what's your forum and what good can you do in this context? So after you get that level of authoritative doctrine, then there's a level of prudential disciplinary judgments below that, which are not, which you can deviate from if conscience requires you to do so. And one thing I found immensely helpful was thinking, conscience only kicks in when I'm required to actually do something. Now, I'm not a priest, so I'm not going to be asked to bless a same-sex couple after Fiducia Supplicans. But a priest is legit, if we consider that a disciplinary measure, not authoritative doctrine, which I think it should be classed as for this reason, a priest can by conscience decide not to do it. Whereas I'm bound by conscience for other things, being married, contraception, all kinds of stuff, which a priest isn't. So the question then becomes, if this is really coming from conscience, how does it affect me in my state of life? I don't have to always feel full clarity and full understanding about everything going on in the church at every moment I'm a Catholic believer. That's not required of me to believe. I need to feel entirely sure about the dogmatic level, and I need to have a hermeneutic of charity and good faith when it comes to the authoritative level. But lots of things actually have very little to do with me personally. Even something like the death penalty, which is one of the most challenging issues that came up. You know, I don't work on death row. I'm not in the criminal justice system. I'm in a country where no one's been hung since 1962 or something. So it's not going to be an issue of conscience for me. I might find it troubling and I might want clarity, but it's not this sort of crisis of conscience moment.
For you personally.
Exactly, where I might need to administer a lethal injection and feel that I've been told by the church it's inadmissible.
Well, not just that, but maybe be in a position where you had to explicate the church's teaching on the death penalty. That would be...
Yeah. Yeah. And it got close to me on some things, and people would ask me, and I was always happy to speak, you know. But the other thing as well, apart from states of life, the other thing to bear in mind in this conversation is that there was a document, what's it called, Donus Veritatis, came out in the early 90s. on the mission and calling of a theologian when Ratzinger was prefect of the CDF, the then CDF. It's a brilliant document on how to raise concerns. It offers what I would call a grammar of dissent, a means of how to do it and how to do it appropriately. And Catholic authority isn't totalitarian. Of course, we believe in reason, so reason needs to ask questions and look for answers and find out what the meaning and the significance of things is. But it does say in that document, remarkably for the early 90s, be very careful when it comes to mass media, which then would have been, then it would have been a weekly journal or, monthly journal. I mean, this was pre-internet, 91, 92. But it said, be careful about mass media because the momentum can build around mass media and then you're in the danger of forming a counter-magisterium. That's the phrase it uses. And I just think that's a really prophetic document.
Wow.
It says if you have concerns, raise them in an appropriate forum where people can answer to them.
Right.
And you can have a proper discussion in the pursuit of truth rather than anything which isn't at that level of good faith.
So take the issue then of the death penalty. It seems that according to that document, it would be inappropriate for you and me right now to publicly share what we might find troubling about the new changes to the catechism, but that a theologian in some kind of meeting with other theologians could then bring it up? Is that?
I think that's what it's implying, or it's certainly, it's at the level of a sort of informal chat, which might be in the, exposed to the media. That's if it's going to help people in their belief, it's okay. But you just have to ask yourself, what am I really looking for an answer here? Or am I trying to sign people up or conscript people to something which is going to undermine the overall message of the faith?
Right.
It's a very difficult balancing act to get right. I don't know if I got it right.
Yeah.
And I didn't speak publicly about the pontificate until it was over.
How should we assess, just to sum it up, Pope Francis's pontificate? Can we just say it was a bloody mess and he was a terrible pope? Because that's my opinion. Or is that inappropriate to say?
Is it? I don't know. I would just say God has a sense of humor.
Yeah, I don't know if I'm sure he does, but yet so many people lost the faith and left the church.
Sure.
And I don't think it's unreasonable to connect some of that loss of faith to some of the things Pope Francis did and said and didn't do.
Yeah.
It was a wild mess. And I'm afraid that if we don't just go, that was terrible.
Yeah.
But then go, but why think we're supposed to have good popes? Did you, I almost want to say that, but did you think we were supposed to always have good popes? Why would you think that? Has the church ever taught that?
Yeah.
And if she hasn't, then why is it problematic for me to go, that was a train wreck?
Yeah. I mean, one theory I had, a friend shared with me, was that if we were trying to find God's providence at work in that pontificate, the faithful were given a very clear message that papal oratory is unsustainable.
Yes.
An extreme neo-ultramontanism.
Yep.
And I'm told by he's now a relatively elderly clergyman who worked in the Vatican for many years during JP2 and Benedict XVI. He said it was rife among the curia. He said once Benedict XVI said something he disagreed with, and he was told by a more senior member of the curia, the Pope knows all things.
Wow.
Never question the Pope. He knows everything that will happen.
Could you help our listeners understand ultramontanism, what you're talking about, and why that's an error? Yeah,
so I'm thinking really of, what should strictly speaking be called neo-ultramontanism, which is the view of the in the late 19th century, the view that the Pope's infallibility extends to almost any utterance he might make, not things which are said in his official office on faith and morals, which is ex cathedra, which is the official teaching. If the Pope speaks in his office and solemnly pronounces something on faith and morals, it's infallible. But there are some who believe that the papal office is such that any utterance, or almost any utterance the Pope makes, is graced with infallibility.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's definitely...
And that's never going to happen again.
But you can see the temptation. And I saw Carl Keating, Carl Keating, the founder of Catholic Answers?
Yeah.
He summed it up well in a book he wrote on Pope Francis. To me, this just encapsulates everything. He said, we used to go to Rome to seek to clarify the confusion of our parishes, and now under Francis we go to our parishes to seek clarity due to the confusion coming out of Rome. And that I just thought that was excellent because, if you had a lot of liberal priests doing all sorts of shenanigans and you had John Paul II or Benedict at the helm, you can see the temptation to elevate them and anything they say and to, Yeah.
Yeah.
You got a strong, good, holy priest at the helm of,
Yeah.
But when you don't.
And I think Benedict XVI, whom I love dearly, his theology, his person, he's someone I feel immensely close to spiritually and emotionally. He did something very, very brave and very courageous, actually, by stepping down, because he showed his fallibility and his weakness and his vulnerability.
What do you mean? He showed his fallibility?
By resigning.
Okay.
I think it was actually a really courageous thing to do.
Do you? A lot of people disagree with you.
I know.
But they wouldn't have disagreed with you if we had got a rock star pope.
I know.
Yeah.
I know. But I think for him, what he was saying, people could really believe in him. And he's someone I would be tempted to slip into a kind of ultramontane papalolatry attitude towards, someone I have the highest imaginable respect for. He was able to say, I have weaknesses and I have limits and I can't do this due to age and infirmity, etc. And also to say, my faith in God is such, I believe I've been given permission. I am sure in my prayer life enough to know that God has said you can go.
I wonder what it was like for him during the tumultuous times of the Francis pontificate, just to suffer in silence.
Yeah.
Am I right? He didn't speak out much against Francis, or at all, really.
No, I mean, no. There was some confusion on clerical celibacy, a book published by Cardinal Sarah, which his name went to, and then an official pronouncement came out saying that he didn't consider himself to be co-author and he didn't know why his name had gone to it. It was a bit confusing.
Okay.
I'm not quite sure exactly what happened there. But if you read, there's a book called Last Testament, which was an interview he did after resigning. And in that he talks about how he'd been an academic for a couple of decades. He was tired in the mid to late 70s and was thinking about retiring. And then he got made Bishop of Munich. He said no. His spiritual director told him to say yes. He went back and said, okay, I'll do it.
Oh, wow.
JP2 loved him, brought him in as prefect. Yeah. And he asked, I think 3 times, he asked JP2 if he could resign. Wow. And JP2 said, when I die, you can go. I need you. So JP2 died and he was like, oh, finally. Been waiting 15 years to retire. And then, we know what happened. And then who could he go to? The Pope had said no. His spiritual director had said no. His academic superiors had said no. You go all the way up, and there was only one person left to ask. God. And that person said yes. Okay. And he talked about it. Yeah. He said he prayed and God told him you can go. And I've never seen any reason to doubt that. I know it's, we'll get loads more clicks and stuff if I come up with some kind of crazy theory about what was really going on. But you read it and think this was a prayerful decision a man of integrity made. That's what I honestly believe.
Jason Everett has said, and I think it's really wise, that he said it occurred to him that if he kind of chased down all the rabbit trails about what's really going on in the Vatican and behind the scenes and who's pulling the levers and where does the corruption go, suppose he were to discover all of that.
Yeah.
And it was all made clear to him. Well, then what? Well, then it's like, all right, well, love your wife and your children. And unless you're aware of something illegal that you could then report, it's like your life's pretty much the same.
Yeah.
And I've been thinking lately about how much energy is wasted in going down these rabbit holes I don't know what it is, because I get the temptation to sort of, when I could just love what's under my authority. Maybe that's a cop-out. I want to challenge that, because it seems like common sense in a way to say, love your wife, love your children, be a faithful man, that's enough. It's like, well, is it actually? Because maybe you're underestimating your reach and what you should be doing. I think that's also possible. But certainly if you're going down rabbit holes and being all sardonic on Facebook and wherever people are sarcastic and sorts of things, it's like, and if that's getting in the way of your primary responsibility, what you have authority over, clearly that's an evil thing. Yeah.
No, I agree. I mean, maybe we need some kind of teaching on this third sphere that's opened up between the professional theologian who's under vows and, bound by canon law, which is what that document's focused on, and then the lay kind of media personality, which is a more recent phenomenon.
Yeah, like how terrifying is it to you as an academic that the average YouTuber may have more influence than you? No offense.
Yeah, no, it's fine. Yeah. Until today, obviously.
Until today.
Yeah, I mean, I know of a seminary rector who speaks of a counter-magisterium. No, a counter-formation. He says there's 2 forms. There's formation. There's what the internet's forming, and there's what we're trying to form. And sometimes they're in tension. I mean, academic theology is different to what you mostly get on YouTube. Normally, you can provide academic arguments if there's a particular problem. It's difficult because for years, I think some seminary teaching was highly questionable, and good, faithful young men going into seminary learnt to keep their heads down, smile and nod, say what needed to be said, so they can be ordained and be good, faithful priests. In my experience, where I live in the UK, I don't think that's the case anymore. I think it's the quality is good, and the general disposition of most people within the sort of mainstream of the church is orthodox and faithful in a way it probably wasn't, from what you hear, the horror stories you hear about the 70s and 80s. But yeah, you do get, not so much among seminarians, among students generally, you do get some crazy ideas coming up, and you think this must have come from
the internet,
something online.
When your team's communication is scattered, people notice, especially your customers. Messages slip through the cracks, responses drag on, and suddenly the whole thing starts to wobble. It's amazing how quickly a bit of disorder can drain the life out of your business momentum. That's why today's episode is brought to you by Quo, spelled Q-U-O, the business communication system built so you never miss a call. Quo makes staying connected with your customers a genuinely effortless experience. Instead of juggling missed calls, scattered texts, or half-finished conversations, your whole team can work from one shared number. Everyone sees the full thread, replies quickly, and customers actually feel cared for. It's not just another phone system, it's the highest rated one on G2, trusted by more than 90,000 businesses of every size. Whether you're solo or growing fast, Quo keeps you reachable and professional wherever you are. On your phone or computer, you can keep your current number, add teammates easily, and let smart call routing handle the rest. The AI even logs calls, summarizes them, and highlights next steps so nothing slips through the cracks. Need after-hour support or lead qualification? It's on that too. And with calls, texts, voicemails, and contact details all in one tidy view, your team always knows the customer story, making every conversation smoother and far more personal. So money's on the line, so always say hello to Quo. Try Quo for free, plus get 20% off your first 6 months when you go to quo.com/pints. That's quo.com/pints. Brothers, we live in a strange time, right? We've never been more connected in some way, and yet many men feel deeply alone. It's easy to fill our days with work, noise, even good things, and still not be truly known by anyone. And it's in that kind of isolation that we become vulnerable, drifting, discouraged, and more easily pulled away from who God is calling us to be. I have met so many men, I have lost count, who have said Exodus 90 has blessed them tremendously. All right, that's why our sponsor Exodus 90 is inviting you into something better. The Holy Friendship Challenge, beginning July 1st, is an invitation into real brotherhood. Small groups of men walking together toward Christ, growing in prayer, learning what true friendship actually looks like. Led by Dr. John Cutterback, this journey is about rediscovering the kind of friendship that strengthens us, grounds us, and draws us closer to the Father. If you've been longing for deeper connection, for brothers who know you and walk with you, this is your invitation. This summer, I want to invite you to break out of the loneliness of our age and grow in Christian friendship. Join the Exodus 90 Brotherhood today and sign up for Holy Friendship starting July 1st. Download the Exodus 90 app to start your 14-day free trial, or visit exodus90.com/Matt to learn more. That's exodus90.com/Matt. Download the app today and become the man God created you to be. You know, again, to kind of make an analogy to kind of mainstream American culture and the political conversation, it's like the new right are furious at the middle right because they screwed everything up. They'd made all the concessions. You didn't have anyone manfully speaking out against sodomy or divorce or abortion or whatever. And it's like we lost our country, you know, immigration and that sort of thing. And so now you just see this real anger on the part, and maybe rightfully so, of young men who want their bloody country back, you know? And maybe the way they express it is bad or wrong or misdirected, but the very reason they're saying it with that much vigor is precisely because the other thing didn't work. So if you think that's basically right, same thing's happening in the church, right? There's all the shenanigans and the bull crap that we were subjected to. Like, I remember being, just to reiterate some of the horror stories, I remember going to a retreat in Ireland, and I was in the library. It was like a Benedictine or something monastery. No one wore the habit, of course. Cynically, he says. And then I went into the library, and the tabernacle was on the ground because they had removed it from the chapel because the priests, and maybe it wasn't just the priests, maybe they were doing yoga in the chapel, and so they wanted to. So I was like, "What's this on the ground?" I opened it up, and the blessed. So we could spend years talking, but the point is, there are so many horror stories like that. It's like people are like, "I'm done. Like I'm done trying to find the middle ground. This is bananas, and we're not going to pretend it's not bananas anymore."
Yeah.
Do you think that's kind of right?
No, I do. And I think partly what's happened since the Francis years, because Pope Leo's generally been, we haven't got quite this frenetic mess going on.
Yeah.
A lot of this energy online and these people that have got big followings and so on is now turning towards, I suppose, what you'd call conservatives rather than traditionalists. They've become the kind of target in a way, which is unfortunate for me because I'm in that group. I'm very much
Explain that to me more.
Well, I mean, people that would consider themselves to be in the centre of the church debate, definitely not liberal.
Yep.
Followers of JP2, Benedict XVI.
Yeah, so I guess that's me.
Faithful to the council, but very fond of traditional liturgy in the broadest sense, which I'm sure we'll get to in more detail, but not an exclusivist towards the Vitus Ordo or the TLM. But very happy with Summorum Pontificum that it was opened up again and made available, and want the Novus Ordo to be delivered in a much more reverent traditional manner. But maintain that hermeneutic of authority towards church leaders and consider themselves to be broadly in the middle, in the centre, if you like.
And so you're saying that today under Leo,
I think I've noticed a lot more bad feeling towards the sort of conservative camp coming from some more on the traditionalist side.
Okay.
Because I think people need something to talk about.
Yeah.
Because Pope Francis is no longer saying stuff on aeroplanes.
Right.
And there's all this energy, and you need a lot of content when you're online, as you know.
So what do you, good. So what do you see the Catholic YouTubers talking about right now?
Well, I've just noticed a lot more negative comments towards conservatives or Ratzingerians, which is what I am.
I see.
As somehow this is where it all went wrong. Let's get them.
Yeah, okay.
They open the door to Francis.
So this is to Francis my point, right, fault. About the middle right. No longer,
exactly. Okay. But it's different from the political sphere. These analogies, they can be helpful and it helps us understand it, but it's very, very different to the political sphere because in the political sphere, people they might not want to be, they might say they're post-liberal or whatever, but everyone is bound by a presupposition of a social contract. So you will give the leaders their authority. You mandate them to be an authority to the degree that you agree with them. And you consider it to be in your best interest that they rule over you. Social contract theory came around in the Enlightenment. Catholicism was around a long time before then. Catholicism has no social contract at all. It doesn't mean to say disagreement isn't difficult and we don't, we have to make sure we don't sacrifice our intellect and so on. But the starting point within the church is never, do I like this leader? The starting point is, he deserves my love. I might not like him, but I have filial love for his office, even if I intensely dislike him. And to live in that difficulty, that's what is required of us as Catholics, because private judgment can be a massive problem.
Yeah, and so do you think a lot of the problem is maybe in America, maybe and elsewhere as well, where you elect representatives, prime ministers and things, that we just have that mentality?
Yeah.
That we,
Everyone's a rebel, and the rebelliousness is great. I find it really fun in the political sphere. I find it really funny that all of a sudden people like Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama are not put on these kind of pedestals, and you realize that actually there's much to poke fun at, there's much to rebel against, and there's much that was problematic with the consensus before 2016. I'm really into that. I found the whole thing really intellectually invigorating and good fun. But we do not start from this point of automatic rebellion within the church. That's where you cease to be Catholic.
Oof.
Really.
So what do we do? How do we reorient ourselves? Because to reorient ourselves will feel to some like to be willfully naive or to be a sucker.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think I do.
Like what did Pope Leo say recently about how he thinks that we should be less afraid of Islam? And I'm like, I don't think so. I think that's wrong. I think you're wrong there. What should I say instead of that?
Well, I mean, that comment would come down in that lowest level of doctrine I talked about.
Right.
Kind of disciplinary prudential matters. So it's not binding at all. There's nothing in the solemnly proclaimed documents about Islam that's a different matter. We are required to believe that Muslims worship the one God.
We're not?
No, we're required to believe that they do worship the one God,
good.
yeah. But in terms of solemn pronouncement, it doesn't get much further than that, or at the level of, an ecumenical council. So the hermeneutic of charity within me would suggest that thinking globally, there might, there's more to Islam than perhaps meets the eye, and thinking about it from the perspective of the particular challenges of the West and the civilizational crisis of the West and mass immigration and the challenges that's presenting, certainly to my own country, that the perspective on Islam is rather different. And it needs to be...
what Leo said.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But if you're speaking in the office he has in Tunisia, I believe, as well.
In what?
In Tunisia, I think he was talking about this, I believe, in a majority Muslim country where he's a guest and he's functioning in his political office, in a diplomatic role. And I'm willing to believe that was a prudent truth from the perspective he was in at that point. Okay. If you ask me as an Englishman who's seen the difference between the mid-1990s and the mid-2020s, the answer would be different, but he's not an Englishman of my age.
Yeah. Yeah, certainly finding a way to not friggin' set your hair on fire and scream at the moon every time the Pope says something would be good for everybody's mental health. That would be nice. If we could all just
definitely,
not spiral immediately.
Yeah. And I try and have the hermeneutic of charity. Excuse me, I believe that he's saying less.
Yes, thank God.
He is considered in what he says.
Yeah. Some
of it's tough. We'll get to some of it. And you've mentioned something which I know many people I know have found very, very tough. And just generally some people thinking that the whole priority system of the Roman hierarchy is basically just, boomerism. And that, I've got lots of people that say that, and I get that. But the other thing we have to remember is, and this is, one doesn't want to be one really doesn't want to be in a position where you just feel that you're you're explaining everything away.
Yeah.
To the point
Coping.
Exactly. Yeah. But there's a real generational thing here as well. So Pope Francis was the first Pope that was ordained after the council.
Yep.
We've now got the second. We are now in the Francis years, and to a certain extent now, I would believe, under Leo, what we have is the bit that many people were dreading, which was when that generation ordained in the late 60s, early 70s, and mid to late 70s
are at the helm. Yeah.
Yeah. And we have to get through that period. Now, to turn around and say the whole thing is going to hell in a handcart is not the right answer. That's what I wish to say. It's a bit like, it's a silly analogy, but I've made it before. If you've ever been as silly as I have been and accidentally put normal gas, petrol, in a diesel car.
I have not.
And realised within a few seconds, you have to sort of work it through, and it stunts and chugs and makes funny noises, and you just have to keep driving, and then eventually it will have worked through.
Oh, that's interesting analogy.
And that's what we're kind of going through. It's going to be tough because this generation are at the helm.
Yeah.
And a lot of the cardinals are of exactly that age. And it was just pure discontinuity, spirit of Vatican II. Let's make a whole new age here. Everything's completely different. We know better than anyone else has known since the time of the New Testament. Let's do it.
Right.
That thinking has formed some of the minds with the most influence in the church at the moment. And it's down to us to try and keep things steady. I get a lot of solace from St. Francis of Assisi on this stuff.
Yeah.
A lot. Because I think thinking of it in terms of spirituality is very important. And what did St. Francis do? He focused nearly all of his energy inwardly on his own interiority, his own sanctity. He was called to rebuild the church. What did he do? He never stopped pushing himself to be as Christ-like as he possibly could, to the point, to a level which far exceeds anything that any of us could imagine as achievable for ourselves. He went in and kept on pushing to be more and more holy, more and more holy. That was the basis of his calling to rebuild. That's what gave him the mandate to do it. And it was building up, so it was constructive as well. And what we also see in Francis is someone who came over 1,200 years after Christ. So Francis, it also gives us hope that the best can be yet to come. If over a millennium after Jesus, someone comes who's the alter Christus, the person that after the Blessed Virgin is the nearest to Christ that anyone seems to have got.
Who, Francis?
Yeah.
You have a high...
Yeah, I mean, he's known as the Alter Christus, the other Christ, which is not
Yeah, I mean, I
common.
wouldn't dispute it, I guess. I mean, he's a wild, holy man.
And this, I think that also tells us that the best can be yet to come, and that we can approach history with a certain sense of hope.
Yeah, that's what we need right now.
Yeah.
I think it's what we want, but I think we're afraid to have it. It'd be like if you were in a bad marriage.
Yeah.
And you kept getting disappointed.
Yeah.
And the feeling of hope rises up within you, and you get to a point where you're like, what the hell? I can't be bothered being disappointed again. This is not my marriage that I'm actually getting. Sure. I love my wife. But I could see that where you just give up, because giving up's easier.
Yeah.
But it's like if there was really a sign of hope.
Yeah.
Oh, we'd like that very much. Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, I think of an analogy of marriage often with those that would want to say that the hierarchy's been captured and it's all over and everything went wrong at the council, because I do think that's the easy option.
Despair, pessimism.
I think so. And if you're in a difficult marriage, surely the easiest thing in the world would be to think, well, I can trade in my wife with all of her difficulties and all of our struggles for a much younger, fresher, simpler model who's naive and impressionable.
Yes.
But all this and all of her imperfections will come up, and it will be very difficult. And that's not the Catholic way, and we don't believe marriage can be traded in like that. And I sometimes think
it doesn't work anyway.
Exactly.
Like, even if it could,
exactly.
It would be a bad idea.
Exactly. But I sometimes speak to people who talk about the conciliar church in this kind of way, and they really remind me of the kind of midlife crisis dad of 52 who's traded his wife in for a 25-year-old who's got everything in all the right places, really looks the part.
Okay.
Not quite right.
Did you ever struggle with this? Did you ever go through a period where you were like really wrestling with Vatican II, or no?
No, not really.
No.
I've always been quite happily convinced by the documents themselves.
Yeah. I like how Ralph Martin puts it. He says, and I wonder what you think of this, he says the problem isn't with the documents. And of course, documents from councils aren't infallible. Aren't inerrant. And could be said better, right? Is that fair? Okay.
Yeah.
And so he said, documents are good. What needed to be clarified has been clarified. What needs to be exercised from the church is the spirit of Vatican II. Yeah. Anyway, but what do you have to say?
I completely agree with that. I mean, I suppose because I was a student of theology when I converted to Catholicism, I went straight to the documents. And in 2008, the digital counter-magisterium hadn't quite kicked into gear by then. So the internet wasn't quite as full of information to question that. And because I was studying theology, I actually had to read documents like Lumen Gentium, Gaudium et Spes anyway as part of my degree. So I read them in the run-up to my conversion as a young man. And the documents said are not unorthodox, they're fine, they're inspiring. There's a massive problem around the implementation and that period of the quote-unquote spirit. I completely agree with Ralph Martin there.
The documents were all written by people who celebrated the Latin Mass?
Of course.
Right?
Yeah.
Like there was no Novus Ordo priest writing those documents.
Exactly. So it's about the implementation and the sort of chaos that ensued after the council. But
so what do you chalk that up to? Because it was bananas.
I really don't know. I mean, it's a I don't know. You had a guest on, Father Pericone, and I watched that episode in which he talked about the 70s and what it was like in seminary, and it's very strange. And you kept on asking that these people were also formed in the Latin Mass. The people, the vanguard, who were insisting that everyone stops wearing cassocks and all this stuff, they were also formed in the traditional Latin Mass. So
what happened?
It's very confusing.
Well, it could have been a revolutionary time. It was like the culture out of which these people were raised. Everything seemed to be like the 60s may have been the worst time to have a council because there was revolution in the air. The one thing I've tried to understand to understand my traditional loving brothers and sisters, one way I think about it is this. I think, suppose like next year there was an implementation that made the Novus Ordo as different as the current Novus Ordo is to the Latin Mass. Does that make sense? Like a new...
but newer.
Yeah, like a new Novus Ordo. Like imagine if a Novus Ordo was implemented, and the Novus Ordo was as different from the Novus Ordo as the Novus Ordo is from the Latin Mass, and in the same direction. It's like, what could you imagine? Maybe we could have lazy boy recliners because we want to rest in the love of God. Like people would rightly lose their freaking minds.
Yeah.
And I think, well, fair enough, you know? And suppose you say, yeah, but you've got no right to be angry because you didn't experience that transition. The Novus Ordo is all you've ever known. It's like, that's kind of like if you were a young kid in a family and you heard about stories about how your parents and children used to gather together every night to read a book by the fireplace. But now the parents are older and have given up and you barely see your parent. You'd rightly be like, well, why didn't I get that?
Yeah.
So I feel like people are right to be frustrated.
No, they are. And I know from, I've got colleagues that teach liturgy and they walk the students through Sacrosanctum Concilium.
Yeah.
And people just can't believe this is what Vatican II says on the liturgy.
I know.
Because they've got the Novus Ordo Spirit of Vatican II in their minds. I still hold firm to the view that I think the Novus Ordo and Vitus Ordo can be complementary in the life of faith, and you can breathe with both lungs. What frustrates me is a lot of criticism of the Novus Ordo are things which are not intrinsic to it, in my view.
Okay.
So in London, where I've had the entirety of my Catholic life, my adult life, most of the big parishes in London, the solemn mass, the principal mass on a Sunday morning will be a Latin Novus Ordo, ad orientem, reverent kneeling at the altar rail, receiving on the tongue.
Beautiful.
Etc., etc.
Thank God that's still allowed.
So when people say, well, look, the Latin Mass, I think, well, yeah, but I've been going to a Latin Mass for most of my adult life. But it's a Novus Ordo, the reverent Novus Ordo. So I don't think the problems are intrinsic with the Novus Ordo. The implementation of it, there are a few, clearly problems, but I don't believe it's... People are often taking the worst example of a Novus Ordo and comparing it to the beauty and majesty of the Vitus Ordo.
Yeah.
And that doesn't really work. Now, I know that's not true in other places, and I've spent some time in the States. I was in a town last summer where, my local parish church, Novus Ordo, I just thought, even I was just like, I can't do this. And I found an FSSP parish on the other side of town and went there instead. So if I was in that kind of situation, I can understand people build this massive animus toward the Novus Ordo. But I don't think the problems are intrinsic to it. And I get very uneasy when people talk about leaving or joining the Novus Ordo. And I say, well, so-and-so's joined the Novus Ordo, this kind of thing. Well, that's a Novus Ordo church,
Why don't you like that?
I don't like that because you're drawing this hard and fast line between two different churches. Now, if you want to do ecclesiology, you want to talk about what it means to be the Catholic Church, etc., fine. But if you're Catholic, you use titles which are in magisterial documents, which have been used by saints and doctors of the Church. No one anywhere has spoken about a Novus Ordo church. No one in authority. No one anointed by the Spirit to speak on these matters. It's not a real title. It's a Protestant thing to make up, basically, to say, well, this is the church, this is a priest, etc. I entirely respect people like FSSP who are exclusive to the Vitus Ordo, and I completely respect that, and I'm very grateful for them and the richness they bring to the church. And I love the Vitus Ordo. But I can't accept this hard and fast division between them. I think the document Summorum Pontificum that was done under Benedict XVI was a very wisely done document. Because what he did in that document is he said he would unconditionally liberate what was called there the extraordinary form, but he didn't do any kind of intervention or force anything. He accepted that the Novus Ordo is accessible, it's ordinary, it's what most people know, and he had the wisdom to know that we got into the problems we did with the Novus Ordo when the papacy and the hierarchy felt that they could intervene on the organic development of liturgy using liturgical experts who could then redraw a whole new template and force it on everyone. And he said, okay, people do the Novus Ordo. That's been regnant for some decades. It's what people know. And by the way, it's, fed into the life of sanctity of people like Saint Mother Teresa of Calcutta, the people that founded the Franciscans of the Renewal, incredibly holy people, wonderful, inspiring people that were formed and nourished by the Novus Ordo. And Benedict XVI didn't just come in and say, well, let's just sort of shut this down and do this, because he didn't believe that that was appropriate for the person in authority. He accepted what was happening. Yeah. I'd like to think the two could mutually enrich each other again.
I remember talking to a FSSP priest who said to me that he wouldn't want done to the Novus Ordo what was done to the extraordinary form. I think for the reasons you're getting at, namely people have been raised in this faith.
Yeah.
And to have the rug pulled out from them so violently would actually do a lot of damage to people.
It's in God's wisdom. And, at the eschaton, there'll be the marriage feast of the Lamb. It's in the book of Revelation. There'll be one rite at the end. Things are going to have to come back together again at some point.
Oh, so there was an interview with the Superior General of the Priestly Society of Pope Pius X. What are your, first of all, what's just your opinion of SSPX?
I've not.
Big question.
Yeah, it is a big question, and I don't have much personal experience. I'm always quite uneasy about speaking out about stuff that I don't have much personal experience of. But I've tended to. I've chosen not to go to any SSPX chapels or anything like that. To me, it goes really sort of fundamentally counter to what I understand it is to be Catholic and under the authority of the Church, generally.
Yeah, I don't know. But because I don't know, I kind of think it's the Church's fault.
Yeah.
Here's what I mean. I was in Austria, and even the Franciscans, right? Because it was with the University of Franciscan, Steubenville, in Austria. And even they, who you wouldn't accuse of being trads by any means, would say, don't go to the parish church. It's an invalid Eucharist.
Wow.
I shouldn't be laughing. It was horrendous. I mean, the bad priest just making up the words of institution.
Wow.
So anyway, we're in Vienna, and I'm like, Latin Mass. And so my wife and I go to this Latin Mass, and it turns out it was an SSPX chapel. And we didn't know that until the homily, because the homily, of course, was all in German, and then Lefebvre's name kept getting mentioned. But it was completely beautiful, and I went to confession to an SSPX priest, and it was really wise and merciful and good. And so my experience there was good, and I just thought to myself, what do you think about this? Like, it's easy to kind of berate people for going when you live in America or England where you have a decent liturgy.
Yeah.
But there's some places in Germany and Austria where you kind of don't. And maybe you think that's an exaggeration, but I'm more sympathetic. And then I think to myself, well, there's so much confusion about whether or not I'm allowed to. I mean, people disagree on this. Maybe you disagree and you can educate me.
Yeah.
There seems to be enough confusion about this that I feel like, I don't know if I'm morally responsible if it's wrong to go there, because I know that the Orthodox are in schism. That's been made clear. But it's not been made clear at all that the SSPX are in schism. I don't think they are. And so isn't it the Church's responsibility to be really clear about that for my sake? And if they're not, can't I just give them the benefit of the doubt, especially when in a country where the Eucharist might be invalid? What do you think?
Yeah, and I don't know where conscience would lead me if I was in that sort of situation. I honestly don't know. And I know of very good people who, during COVID, attended SSPX chapels because the Mass was there, unrestricted, and it wasn't available. And I respect that decision. I mean, for me, it's really about the kind of the fundamental theology at play in terms of what you understand Catholicism to be. I understand Catholicism to be universal. Now, most of us think, understandably, universal means geographically universal around the world faith, the highest of the world religions, etc. But it's also universal with regard to time, temporality, which means it must always be in step, to some extent, with the present. If at any point you draw a line and say, this has ceased to be Catholic, that's where you cease to be Catholic. Because to be Catholic means to be universal over time. God is the Lord of history. I really believe that.
Well, then what do you say to those who would draw that line around the SSPX and say, this isn't Catholic?
What, those who would say the SSPX aren't Catholic?
Yeah.
Well, they're right, because I think the SSPX have done that. They've said we can abrogate everything that's happened since the Council. And therefore, doctrinal development stopped. And the Church has gone fundamentally wrong. And to think that you can abrogate decades of history and say that the Catholic Church has gone completely and utterly wrong, to draw that line in the sand is to say that the Church is no longer has its universality over time. And people have always wanted to, this is part of the scandal. This is the scandal of the Incarnation, the scandal of Catholicism, is that the eternal is present to us in time, which is extremely difficult for people to understand and stomach and live with. And we flip from one to the other and we find it very difficult. But this is exactly what happened with Jesus and the fundamental heresies of the Church, people saying the eternal cannot be present in time. And that's what we're asked to do with the Church itself as the body of Christ, which means there might be elements of Vatican II which, in their implementation, which were imprudent, and all kinds of issues which have come up since then that we have to work through.
Yeah.
But to think that you can just turn around and draw a line and say, this is no longer fully temporal, is to get to the very heart of what it is to be Catholic.
No longer fully temporal. What does that mean?
Well, it means it's no longer developing organically through history.
Okay.
It's preserved in aspic.
In
aspic, which means, so it's sort of like preserved, it's sort of set in stone at a particular point,
okay. I see.
rather than developing with time.
Okay.
So the challenge of the faith is to believe that the eternal is made present to us in terms proper to the time in which we live, in the present. That's the development of doctrine, and that's the development of the church, which stays the same whilst moving with time. And I generally, with various wings of traditionalism, there seems to be a refusal to accept change at a particular point and say this is where we draw the line, which coincidentally is exactly what Martin Luther did with the New Testament. You know, again, Benedict XVI got this right. He said there are two fundamental errors which end up becoming the same thing. There's radical progressivism, which is saying everything has to change, move with the times, women's ordination, same-sex blessings, the works. And then there's what he called radical archaeologism, which is being an archaeologist and thinking you can find the perfect, immaculate level before it went wrong and saying this is it, and then drawing the line there. And they're both examples of the same root error, which is to draw back from the present, to draw back from the reality of the church as it's there before you, just as Jesus was before the disciples, and say this can't be eternal and temporal at the same time.
So we all pay for phone service, so why not make that money do something good? That's why I'm a fan of our sponsor, Charity Mobile. They're a pro-life company helping build a culture of life right here in America. And here's the thing, you're not sacrificing anything. You still get nationwide coverage, no contracts, and solid, reliable service. But with Charity Mobile, a portion of your bill goes to support a pro-life or pro-family charity that you choose. Over the years, that's added up to millions of dollars, going to causes that actually matter. Plans start under $50 a month. You get a free phone with a new line, plus free activation and shipping. And their customer service is based right here in the US, staffed by people who share your values and truly understand you. So really, it comes down to this. Why not have your phone bill reflect what you believe? To get started, visit CharityMobile.com/MattFradd. That's CharityMobile.com/MattFradd and use promo code MattFradd at checkout. So one of the things I have been thinking about lately is this. We all want peace, but we don't necessarily all want surrender. But the truth is, you don't get one without the other. That's why I'm really excited about what our sponsor Hallow is doing this June. They're launching a challenge based on my book, Jesus, Our Refuge, and it's all about going deeper, learning what it actually means to draw close to the heart of Christ, not just in a sentimental way, but in a real transformative way. Because his heart loves us unconditionally, right? But it also calls us higher. It asks us to let go of sin, to loosen our grip on worldly desires, and to be united more fully with him. And look, that's not easy, but it is good. Hallow is so excellent. I've used it for over 8 years now, and I keep subscribing because it keeps being excellent. So if you've been feeling the pull, like there's more to your spiritual life than what you're currently living, I'd really encourage you to check out Hallow and join the challenge this June. Visit hallow.com/MattFradd to get 3 months free. And let's make this June a month of surrender, connection, and genuine prayer. Again, that's hallow.com/MattFradd for 3 months free. I have a friend who was with the FSSP. They were not whatever enough, so he went to the SSPX. And then he decided the SSPX were too liberal. And then he went to some other thing. Now they have a priest who comes to their home to celebrate Mass for their family. I call this like purity spiraling.
Yeah.
Where, and I'm interested in the psychological underpinnings of that. Because I get it. That's the thing. Like maybe that's why this bothers me so much, because I'm not, you're not going to win me over to the Father James Martin ideas of the world. There's nothing about that attracts me. It's like the celery and chocolate or something like that. I'm like, I don't need to resist the celery or something. Yeah. But it's like, I get the desire. And I'm not accusing everyone in the SSPX of doing that, but certainly it seems like this fella in his house with a priest who's more trad than the SSPX. It's like, what is that? What do you think that is?
I don't know. I mean, I've seen it a lot online. What you're describing is different. It's sort of real. It's embodied.
Yeah.
It's really happening. I've seen online, and I've experienced it with people I know, and to a certain extent myself, where you think something which seemed once sort of slightly untouchable, relic from the past, and you actually think about it and you think, actually, that's okay.
That's okay?
That's okay, this idea for, something, I'm trying to think of an example that I can share publicly.
Yeah.
So an example of something that's been completely rehabilitated now, but was seen as very outdated 20 years ago, would be what's called typology. So understanding the Old Testament to be entirely and utterly properly interpreted through the lens of the New, all leading up to Jesus, the whole thing. Because we were taught then we have to go back into the mindset of the time before Christ and read it like a Second Temple Jew would have read it.
Mm-hmm.
And people no longer do that. Praise God. It's wonderful. But when people first started saying, why can't we just read it like the fathers did? It was really kind of edgy and spicy. And like, but isn't that really disrespectful? And aren't we losing our sense of history and not bearing in mind that this is a Hebrew Bible? And then it was like, well, no, because this is the church tradition and this is how it's been received. And now that's become completely mainstream again.
Oh, okay.
So then people think, well, maybe if that spicy, edgy thing is completely vindicated, or maybe this other spicy, edgy thing is completely vindicated. And they find something that, Pio Nono, Pius IX said about the marital debt or something like that, and say, well, actually, this is okay.
Yeah.
And that seems unconscionable at first, but let's think about it. Maybe it's okay.
Yeah.
And then you do it, and it's often quite playful online as well. It's often like messing around and like, well, what about this one and that one? And then before you know it, everyone's lost it.
Yeah, and it's like the most extreme version wins. Like if you can hold the most extreme version on whatever that is, the marital debt or no salvation outside the church or liturgy or what have you, you get to be the coolest guy.
That's the purity spiraling that I've seen.
Yeah.
It's kind of who's the biggest edgelord.
Yeah, and that's right, edgelording. Yeah. And again, I'm not accusing those who are TLM. That's not what I'm saying. But certainly within those ranks, you see it. You see.
Yeah.
You even what's funny is you see people thinking of, as I did, and I guess do in some way, see the East as a safe harbor. It's like, okay, I don't like the trad parish because maybe people are, I don't know, maybe I don't like them, and maybe that's my fault, but I don't like them, and maybe I don't like my Novus Ordo parish, and so it's like the East is like a safe haven. But then what you do is you see purity spiraling there as well.
Yeah,
so
completely.
It's like you join the Ruthenians, and then they're not hardcore enough, so you find a Melkite church, and then you actually leave and become Orthodox.
Yeah.
You're only Greek Orthodox, and if you want to be really cool, you want to be Russian Orthodox. And
yeah. And I don't want to say anything that's condemning our separated brethren, but for people that go down that road into it, looking for this thing they can't quite get, this sort of itch they can't quite scratch. I just see the Protestant Reformation, Luther, or actually no, Calvin.
Yeah.
Oh no, it was Zwingli. And then complete non-denominational, Mennonites, Quakers. Once you start that splintering, once you walk away from Rome, it all starts to fragment. That's what happens because you're looking for something which is different to what's right in front of you.
I want to read this quotation from the Superior General of the Society of Pope Pius X.
Yeah.
He says, this is a verbatim quote, "In an ordinary parish, the faithful no longer find the necessary means to ensure their eternal salvation. This is what constitutes the state of necessity." So, is it true, Dr. Phillips, that in an ordinary parish, the faithful no longer find the necessary means to ensure their eternal salvation?
No.
And if it's not true, that sounds like an unconscionable thing to throw out there.
Yeah. I mean, I've seen it defended by some saying that he's saying that you can't guarantee.
Well, that's different. But even then,
it's still an incendiary thing to say and deeply damaging. And I think we need to be really, really careful here. The structures of canon law that we have, which dictate to us sacramental validity and so on and so forth, they are all completely solid. They are in place. The personal sanctity of the minister has no effect on the validity of the sacramental celebration. If you go to a local Catholic parish church, I mean, you named an extreme situation where somebody's actually changing the words and changing the liturgy. That's right. Different. That's different.
Yeah. But that's not happening.
But I'm not talking. I might not want to have to stomach acoustic guitars and a load of peace and justice during the bidding prayers.
I do not.
But Christ is there, and maybe God wants me to sit there and stomach that sometimes. where it doesn't actually vindicate me and make me feel that my understanding of the liturgy is wonderful. Maybe God wants me. That's what I try and do. When I find myself in a situation I don't really like liturgically, I think God's put me here, God wants me here.
Yeah.
There's a reason why I'm here. And God is a lot bigger than my liturgical preferences. And as I say, there are many saints, people who've lived the Novus Ordo. It's the ordinary, accessible, available means of salvation for the vast majority of the church, and to turn around and say that Christ is absent in some way, or Christ's victory over sin and death is not strong enough to be the victor over the current weaknesses of the church. Is your faith in Jesus really that weak? The guy that can conquer the devil has been beaten by a few boomer priests. No, Jesus is bigger than all of this. Okay, Christ's love is capacious, and we understand that. We understand that when his arms were stretched out on the cross, they could reach around the whole world and then envelope it in. But the church's capacity for truth is capacious as well, and the church can surmount the problems of history. It always has done, and there have been worse crises than this. There's another thing I don't understand of some of these people. I do not believe the challenges of the church in the post-conciliar era are massively exceptional and are the worst crisis the church has ever been through.
Really? All right. Well, steel man their argument though, because I don't know. Like sometimes my reaction when I hear people say this isn't the worst the church has been through, to me that feels like a defensive coping attitude again. I'm like, well, I don't know. Let's pause. Maybe it is. It seems pretty bad.
Well, I'd say the Protestant Reformation was pretty awful. The collapse of Christendom, hundreds of thousands of people, bloodshed.
Yeah.
Souls lost, entire nations lost to the church.
The argument there would be something like, well, during the Protestant Reformation, whereas people were being peeled away from the bark of Peter, the church at least was saying full-throatedly and reaffirming what the church had always taught. Is that not true?
It is true if we take the aerial view of it with Trent and everything, but as it was actually going on and you're in the middle of it.
Well, I like that.
Aerial
view, yeah.
Before Trent, you've got people like Luther saying, hang on a minute, I know the Greek. None of you cardinals know the Greek. I know the Greek. The word confession isn't there. The word penance isn't there. In fact, the Eucharist is hardly mentioned. We can understand all this very, very differently once you know the real languages. When all that's going on, and the printing press, now it's the digital technology, then it was the printing press, these leaflets are coming along saying, we know the Greek, we know the Greek, we know the Hebrew.
Wow.
And everyone's in the middle of it thinking, wow, this isn't it, that's the real thing, that's the real thing. It's because, there's an explosion of ideas and interpretations and a questioning of authority and all the rest of it. I think it's, in many ways, it's quite a similar time. Newman, St. John Henry Newman said, with a revelation he had, or a realization he had, is looking at the ancient church. He said, Rome was then where she is now.
Okay.
And that's how I feel, just...
Wonder what he would have said today. Because I don't know.
Rome was then where she is now.
Yeah. Yeah.
I do believe he would have said that.
I'm starting to see a lot of people online just kind of acknowledge that they started to go down the, let's say, sede.
Yeah.
And then go, holy crap, what am I doing? That leads to despair really quickly. Did you have any, obviously it's interesting, there was a few people who decided to go full on about Pope Francis being an anti-pope, which always seemed like such an irresponsible, at the very least, thing to do, right? Because if you're right, which you're not, but if you're right, you're in no place to make that pronouncement publicly.
No.
And if you're wrong, which you are, then you risk leading souls out of the church.
Yeah.
But what was your take on that?
I mean, I must admit, I don't want to seem kind of flippant, but I find it all sort of slightly entertaining because it gets slightly silly.
Okay.
I can't say that some years into the pontificate, I was genuinely troubled remembering that the day Benedict XVI resigned, lightning struck the Dome of St. Peter's.
Yeah.
That did play on my mind a bit. But generally speaking, I agree with you that it's irresponsible. It's also overestimating Francis, really, and what he represented. And, as Peter Kwasniewski has said, we had a Jesuit of that generation. I mean, it was almost comic that there could have been nobody worse in some ways than to have a Jesuit of that generation formed by Pedro Arrupe, coming in and teaching what he did. So I find it difficult. But on the sort of day-to-day, in living the faith day to day, I don't really feel that it has that much bearing in terms of the individual's relationship to God with their local community, I suppose. I can't explain everything in the church. I find it confounding, frustrating, annoying, maddening, but the Catholic faith never ceases to unlock layer upon layer of wisdom and inspiration and love and joy and peace.
What's your take on Leo? I don't even know if I'll trust your opinion because I'm afraid you're going to be too charitable. Charitable doesn't mean lying, of course. How about this? The most cynical take I can offer is he's definitely less bad than Francis. That's what I would say.
Yeah. I think he's a very thoughtful man.
Yeah, and he seems serious, which I really appreciate.
Yeah. And he's clearly very, prayerful. And he's not shooting from the hip and all that kind of stuff. He's not unpredictable.
Yeah.
He's a safe pair of hands.
And you get the sense that he knows that that's what the church needs right now.
Yeah, completely. And he's been very clear that he took the name Leo because of Leo XIII. But I felt originally, and he said this wasn't a factor, but when I first heard the name, I thought of Pope St. Leo the Great, who held the bark in unity during all the Christological controversies of the 5th century. And I thought, this is the Pope of Unity. And in fact, his motto is something around unity and truth, isn't it?
Something like that.
He said it had nothing to do with Leo the Great, but I still think it's a nice idea.
Before we get off this topic, I'm going to circle back to the SSPX one more time. So my understanding is that they are planning on ordaining bishops without papal approval, not just without papal approval, but in direct opposition. And then that's going to happen in July. If that goes forward, what do you think will happen? And how should we view the SSPX at that point?
Well, I think we have to hold firm with what Rome are saying on it. I trust the judgment of Rome on this. I'm no canonist. I don't know the exact ins and outs of what would qualify as schism and so on and that sort of thing. But it's very clear that this is a step too far. It's very clear that it's in open contravention of Rome and the Holy Father. And it's an inflammatory thing to say that will not go down very well. But to me, it's just Protestantism.
Yeah, that won't go down well. Because you don't mean Protestantism in the sense that they've abandoned major aspects of the faith, right? Like the Holy Eucharist and...
Well, I think abandoning an ecumenical council is quite serious.
Yeah.
And what renders the Eucharist valid is the existing structures of canon law. They're involved in sacramental validity. So to simply turn around and say that you can go in contravention of canon law and maintain certain bits as valid, to me sounds like a very slippery slope at best.
Yeah.
Which is not to say I am not, as I've always said on this, I am profoundly sympathetic and I do understand, I really do understand the problems with the church, but this is never the answer.
You used to be Anglican.
Yeah.
I don't know how to pronounce this Sheila's name. But the Archbishop of Canterbury, Sarah, is it Mullally or Mullally?
Mullally, I think. I don't know.
All right, go on. What are your thoughts? This is awful, but I mean, it's a Protestant church, so I mean, are we that surprised? And then what's your opinion on Pope Leo sort of acknowledging her in some capacity? Look at all these opportunities I'm giving you to be charitable.
I know. Oh, God. So it's part of his office as Pope to be charitable and generous of spirit towards other Christian believers. And I don't think there's anything of that exceptional that's happened there. I think it's more visually more jarring because...
well, she's pro-abortion, isn't she? Let's look it up. I'm pretty sure.
I'm not quite, she's been called such, yeah. Definitely pros same-sex marriage and so
there's
on.
a lot wrong, but...
Yeah. No, I mean, I think Sarah Mullally is...
A pro-choice Archbishop of Canterbury, yeah.
Yeah. No, nothing I'm saying is in defense of Sarah Mullally.
I feel like you're defending her.
I am not defending Sarah Mullally on any level whatsoever. I think it's actually slightly... I say this very cautiously because I think it just makes you look like a horrible kind of person. But There are real issues around the level of intellectual formation. I think with Sarah Mullally, I'm sure she's a really lovely person in many ways.
I'm not. If you're for the slaughtering of unborn children, I'm not sure you can be called a lovely lady. I think a witch would be closer. Witches eat children, man. Okay, she's not. I don't think she's a witch, but I think witches would like her. Is that too much?
In light of that, then, what do you think Pope Leo could have done differently?
Well, I actually don't. I'm not up to date on exactly what he did do. Yeah, fair enough.
I mean, he just opened it. He opened the door and was welcoming and tried to find points of commonality and agreement between someone who is nominally the representative of a vast number of Christians. I mean, actually,
maybe he could have reiterated the invitation to join the ordinariate. Maybe there was a way that he didn't directly condemn her, but made a statement about the one true church and inviting all Anglicans to it.
Yeah. And I think her doing a blessing in a Vatican chapel and a cardinal bowing his head and crossing himself for a formal blessing.
Yeah, that's horrible.
Is absurd.
Okay,
yes.
good.
No, completely absurd. Yeah. But, diplomatically, I might not particularly like it. I don't particularly like at all where the Church of England's gone, and I don't like Sarah Mullally at all. But within the diplomatic element of the office, I think opening the door and exchanging pleasantries and trying to find common ground for the sake of the greater good, I'm glad I'm not the Pope. I don't have to do it.
Yeah. No, it is an interesting question, hey, like to kind of pontificate from the sidelines, as it were. It was interesting. I interviewed Russell Brand recently, and he was on Piers Morgan's show, and he was kind of going off about the COVID lockdowns and jabs and things. And
yeah,
I think everyone like vaguely agrees. And then Piers said, "All right, you're the Prime Minister of England. What would you have done?"
Yeah,
and he didn't really give an answer there. He said, "I would have listened to everybody."
Yeah,
but again, it's really easy in retrospect to say what you would have done, but.
I mean, it's a slightly facile example, but I've been the head of department at an academic institution.
Yeah.
And I had to stomach lots of stuff I didn't really like. For the greater good of the institution or the department, I had to have conversations and smile and pose for photos of people I really didn't like.
Mm-hmm.
But it wouldn't be helpful for anyone, whether head of department, to make their personal feelings or their disagreements known in those, and I just thought this is what comes with leadership, isn't it?
Yeah.
Lots of grinning and bearing it.
Could you speak more to this? Because I feel like I'm onto something here. Just this idea of wasting energy.
Yeah.
I'm sure you can talk about this much more eloquently and helpfully than I can, but I'm just reaching at this idea right now where it's like, how much time, like how many hours of YouTube videos did we just imbibe about things Pope Francis did? And I don't know, maybe getting angry gives you a sense, it makes you feel something. So it feels productive.
Yeah.
Like you've so I feel productive because I'm angry. And so something's happening and I'm showing to the rest of the world how serious I am and how this can't, and all that might be good, might not be, but just how much energy is wasted when I have everything at my disposal to become a saint, and I'm not a saint, and it's my fault. And one of the reasons it's my fault is because I waste my time pissing around online and choosing to get angry about everything instead of praying my rosary and growing in virtue and repenting of sin and loving my family well. Just this, what do you think about this idea of just the energy that is wasted?
Well, I completely agree, and I'm as guilty of it as the next person. But I completely agree, and I always think of the book of Exodus. What's the first thing the Israelites did when they got on the other side of the Red Sea? Kicked off at Moses.
What's that?
They complained about the leadership.
Oh, right, that too.
Built the golden calf. But this is what people do. People get distracted. What are we called to do? We're called to make the triune God, the person of Jesus, the center of our lives. And what in many ways is the easiest thing for us to forget and get distracted from doing is exactly that. Church politics has become another one of those distractions often.
Yeah.
It can and should feed into the life of sanctity. We can and should understand our own pilgrimage towards sanctity as being sharing a journey of pilgrimage with the church as the people of God. But the reality is it's very easy for us in the midst of that to fall to one side and get distracted by something else. And church politics often becomes that, which is why I made that reference to St. Francis, because I think he looked inwardly to rebuild. That's where we rebuild. What's within my jurisdiction? What's within my capability? Where's the Holy Spirit calling me to function and act now? And I think there's in the last 5 or 10 years, or the last 5 years actually, the awareness of the dangers of smartphones. I don't know if you know the Jonathan Haidt book, The Anxious Generation, and people have suddenly realised that giving kids smartphones is a really bad idea.
I've been telling them that for decades. No one listened to me.
And it does terrible things to adolescents. Well, at some point, I think people are going to realise, well, they already are raising questions about, short form video.
Yeah.
And that very passive, receptive rabbit hole feature, algorithms, and all the rest of it. I've wasted hours of my life when I should have been pursuing sanctity, looking at all this stuff and getting angry and getting frustrated and all the rest of it. But what are we called to do as Catholics? And we're called to proclaim the truth.
Mm-hmm.
Now, there are things within the church that we need to sort out. There's conversations we need to have, and all the rest of it. But, I share your unease, and I think it's just so easy to get distracted from what we're actually meant to be bothered about. I'm a theologian. It's amazing the number of theologians, sometimes myself included, who never talk about God. The word theology is talking about God.
This is a Peter Kreif's joke about a theologian dies and he's about to go to heaven and he's given the opportunity to go to heaven or a lecture on heaven and he chooses the lecture.
Exactly. Exactly. But it's very easy for us to end up talking about something else.
Yeah.
Liturgy, which is that's how God is active in the world. Liturgy is extremely important, but church politics, earthly politics, it's always the easiest thing in the world to suddenly find we've forgotten to be talking about God.
Yeah.
And that's what we should be talking about.
Mm-hmm.
Just like the Israelites crossed the Red Sea, we're given baptism. The storehouses of heaven are opened unto us. The living water of grace pours down upon us. And what do? We say, I don't like the person giving it to me.
Mm-hmm.
I don't like his vestments.
Mm-hmm.
And I get annoyed by vestments as much as the next person. Yeah. But don't look at the vestments. Look at the grace. Look at the sacrament.
I remember I accidentally said this really arrogant thing once and my wife called me out on it. We were living in Steubenville, Ohio, which is a really run-down town with, you'll see meth addicts, you might see a prostitute. Like, it's rough, eh?
Yeah.
And I was just complaining about how exhausted the town looked, especially in winter. We don't even have a lot of snow up there, so it's just gray and mud and then meth people.
Yeah.
And I said to my wife, I'm like, I realized though, remember how St. Francis kissed the leper, Like these people, they're the lepers I can love. And she went, wait, you're St. Francis in this thing?
Yeah.
My point is, I often think that when I'll go to Sunday Mass and I'm sitting there judging everyone.
Yeah.
Not intentional, not trying to.
Yeah.
But just angry. I'm just angry. I'm angry that this arsehole's talking over here.
Yeah.
We're at Mass. This Sheila has got shorts that are way too short, and the music sucks, and the homily sounds like Hallmark wrote it, and I just sit there angry, and I just think, I don't know what I think. I mean, it's not that there aren't validities to those complaints, but I don't know how mature it is to allow other people to steal my peace. I'm not sure if that's the height of Christian manhood, to let other people determine whether I'm going to be upset or not. I don't know. I just think kind of like what maybe you said to me off camera before about being at Mass and just being like, all right, how do I maintain my peace and not...
Yeah.
Because it's quite immature, isn't it? To just be always put out by everybody around you.
I mean, I'm as guilty of it as the next person. For years, I was an altar server. Until having our first child, I would be in the sanctuary. And one of the reasons was that I didn't have to deal with the other people around me.
Sounds great.
Turning their phones down and all that. So you were right in the middle of it, surrounded by smoke, and it was wonderful, And it was when, after we had our first child, I suddenly had to be able to deal with all this stuff, being around other people and their lack of reverence and all the rest of it. And my own ability to get distracted and all the rest of it, but
I could think to it because I'm in Florida, and so people dress pretty casually in Florida.
Sure.
So it's you try to make it reverent, but people have got their flip flops and everyone's talking. And I could say, isn't it beautiful that this church is bursting at the seams right now?
Yeah,
isn't that beautiful?
Yeah,
there could be 10 people here, but this is packed with people who thought that Holy Mass was worth coming to today.
Yeah,
I don't do that, but I could, and maybe I should occasionally.
And I've got, I know a priest who is really switched on to the discourse. He would understand everything about the desirability of dressing for Mass. But I have seen him giving the warmest smiles, handshakes, and welcomes to people who are dressed in a way which is a million miles from that, because he knows that this is their first time and they're a visitor, or, they're not quite sure what the protocol. He understands it, but he knows where they are and where they're at.
Yeah, I don't have to be the dad of this parish. I can just be a child.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of the reasons one of the many reasons I would have been a terrible priest is because I don't have the the generosity of spirit, I'd be annoyed
Yeah.
with some of this stuff.
We are called to evangelize, to share the good news of Jesus Christ. But that's hard to do if we're not really grounded in Scripture ourselves. There's been times in my life where I would say I've been less than optimal at knowing the Scriptures and drawing on the Scriptures. But the St. Paul Center has actually really helped me with this, especially people like Dr. Scott Hahn and Dr. Bergsman. That's why I love them. As a member, you get access to world-class teaching from scholars like those that I mentioned, with over 50 lessons focused just on Jesus, his life, his parables, and the historical reality of the Gospels. It's not just learning facts, right? It's encountering Christ in Scripture in a real way. And when we know Christ, our life changes. Know Christ, share Christ. That's the mission. Start your 30-day free trial today at stpaulcenter.com/pints, or just become an annual member right away. You'll love it, and when you do, they'll even send you a free copy of the Complete Ignatius Catholic Study Bible, which is an incredible resource for anyone serious about growing in the faith. Again, just visit stpaulcenter.com/pints to start your 30-day free trial. What is the most legitimate, even though you don't agree, but what's the most legitimate accusation against the Second Vatican Council documents, and why is it wrong? So I guess it's not legitimate, but do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
What are you most sympathetic to, the argument against one of the documents, or maybe what it said, and why do we not need to be upset about it?
Well, I think with something like this, what you often get to a position where actually something that's a great strength also brings very serious consequences which are challenging. And I think one of the great strengths of all the Vatican II documents is that they left the juridical mode of writing, the paradigm whereby you say this exact fault is wrong, anathema sit. There were no anathemas pronounced. There was a narrative, inspiring, human, scriptural way of writing, which was meant to bring people with it into this change of paradigm. And I think that's important and good. And the fruit we have from that is the Latter-day Catechism, which I think is a wonderful, wonderful book. The challenge of that is we have the lack of clarity.
The challenge of the modern catechism?
Of the move to a narrative, pastoral way of writing conciliar documents.
I see. Yeah.
We have lost that clarity, and that's a problem. We don't have a very specific anathema of the juridical way of writing that you had at Vatican I and, during the Baroque era. So it's legitimate to say that this is you can love it and at the same time understand that there were some seriously challenging consequences have come from that, in that various people doing different things can claim to be being obedient to the same document because it doesn't give you specific anathemas.
And in an age of confusion,
the
one thing we'd really like, and rightly so, is clarity. Because people feel safe when they know what's going on.
Yeah. I agree.
But if you're vague about it, you're vague about where the edges are, then no one knows what's going on, and it actually creates a lot of turmoil.
Yeah.
That's what I see in people today. Like, just give me the straight goods, please.
Yeah. At the same time, though, do you think human history is at a moment where it can bear that kind of clarity? Or we would just get massive splintering?
Yeah.
It's the authority in a position where it can actually be received as authoritative.
Yeah, but
if speaking with full clarity.
If souls are being led away from the truth, it's incumbent upon you to say the hard thing, whether or not people will leave. Like if Pope Leo, let's just take any example, were to come out tomorrow and condemn IVF full-throatedly, as I'm sure he does and will.
Yeah.
There's going to be a lot of Catholics who are going to be upset about that and may not be able to hear it and might leave. But that doesn't mean he shouldn't say that, right?
No, I agree. Yeah. And this is a consequence of the move towards a pastoral paradigm, which perhaps doesn't work as well when you're in a magisterial position of authority. Pastorally, it probably would often not be prudent to do a tub-thumping, fire and brimstone homily on IVF.
Right.
Because there'll be people there who are conceived via IVF.
Yeah.
There'll be couples that didn't even know the church teaching on it, all the rest of it. So pastorally, it's often necessary to be discreet. Maybe you're right. Maybe there's too much emphasis on the pastoral to the point where it becomes an expense of truth. Maybe.
I recorded. So anyway, number one, is there a line or a paragraph in one of the documents that you think you understand why people think it somehow contradicts prior Catholic teaching in the documents?
I guess some of the stuff on freedom of religion in Dignitatis Humanae.
All right. So what would those who object to it say, and what's your response?
Well, those who object to it would look back at, I think it's one of the encyclicals of Gregory VII, where I think he actually says the idea that everybody is entitled to freedom of belief is, I think he uses the word insane.
Cool.
And Dignitatis Humanae makes the majority of it is vindicating the idea of freedom of religion, freedom of belief as a natural human right.
Okay.
My response to that would be to say an encyclical is at that authoritative level, requiring a hermeneutic of charity, but not necessarily, it's not at the same level as a conciliar document, so there is a tension there.
Okay.
I would also say Gregory VII and all those who spoke against freedom of religion believed in natural law and believed in the integrity of conscience and believed in the ability of human reason, even in its fallen state, to comprehend God rightly through natural philosophy, which would suggest there's a legitimacy to other forms of belief and that legitimacy can be respected. And I would also say within Dignitatis Humanae, it goes on in the second half of the document to talk about the freedom of the church from temporal authority, and it does arrogate a special status to the church as the organ of truth, which I would want to interpret charitably as suggesting that in an ideal society we wouldn't need freedom of religion, because if you allow reason to function in genuine freedom, it will always find its home in the church, because that's the fullness of truth.
About a year ago, I guess, I recorded this video just like, I thought, let's just talk about what the good things that are going on, you know? Because whenever you talk about the good things that are going on, you're quickly accused of being, like a cockeyed optimist, you know, someone who's really not in touch with the reality of things. So I began by saying, all right, look, everything sucks. And it's worse. It's worse than both of us think it is.
Yeah.
And, you know, whatever you can say, maybe it's worse than that. And it's like, once you get that out of your system, can we also acknowledge, and I wrote just down a few things here, like Hallow is the #1 prayer app in the world, and it's Catholic. That's bananas. It's not some evangelical thing, which you might imagine. No, it's Catholic. EWTN is the largest religious network in the world. Bible in a Year podcast with Father Mike Schmitz with Ascension Presents is that's the #1 religion podcast. You'd think it would be some Protestant reading the Bible for a year. It's a Catholic priest.
Yeah.
Can we, Truthfully is this excellent AI app. It's like ChatGPT, went through OCIA and became the world's greatest evangelist. It's very good. Focus, the Fellowship of Catholic University students.
Yeah.
They've grown out of cities. They can no longer hold an event in a city.
Yeah.
They have to now disperse it into 3 cities because it's so ginormous.
Yeah.
Not to mention the amount of conversions that are taking place.
Yeah.
So I just want to say to myself, really, you know what I mean? It's not to anyone else. It's like, all right, Matt, like, it's like me talking to my inner pessimist. Like, all right, things suck. Good.
Yeah.
And yet, can we just say this is pretty great? And one of the things that sometimes bothers me, the main thing I think that bothers me about certain traditionalists is you get the sense that if I were to say to them, can we at least say this is good? They wouldn't want to.
Yeah.
They'd say, no, it's infected with modernism or something like that. And I'm like, okay, look, dude, just throw me a freaking bone here. I had the Sisters of Life here recently.
Yeah.
And all of these gorgeous sisters spend their time helping women heal from abortion, help support women so they don't make the tragic choice of abortion. The Friars of the Renewal, sleeping on the floor in New York City and feeding the homeless. Like, is that okay? Well, some things are good, but it's also, you're like, oh, for the love, that's me talking to me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I need to hear it too, I need to hear that too. And it's very easy for these things to become, the technical word would be a meta-narrative. Everything makes sense in light of this. So when you're sitting at Mass and you're like, oh, that's happened because it's a Novus Ordo. That didn't happen before 60. That becomes the narrative for everything, and it takes everything over.
Yeah, like the lens through which you make sense of.
And my life as a Catholic, I know the global picture and the decline of religious practice and all the rest of it and all the problems we've spoken about, but the reality is, when I started studying theology, the theologians we were studying were people who were asking how anybody could have belief in 20 or 30 years' time. The time of religion is over. going to be complete secularization. How's the church possibly going to survive in this age without religion? I mean, this would be in the late 90s.
Yeah, and then 20 years ago we had the new atheism. That may have been the death nail.
Yeah, and that was really big in the noughties.
Where are the atheists?
Exactly.
Where are they?
You know, and
the only ones left are the kind of moderate, sensible ones who aren't blowhards.
Exactly. And I was, you know, one of these obscure young people that was quite into it. Now I feel ancient in many parishes. I've seen churches get more and more popular. I've seen more and more young people come in. I've seen more and more conversions. There's now this whole multimedia engine. You know, I'm actually having a really, really great time being a Catholic.
Yeah.
In the year of our Lord 2026.
It's almost like you need permission. Like you can be joyful.
Yeah.
You can just drop your shoulders, drop this defensive attitude.
Yeah.
Get off social media.
Yeah.
And just love your little shitty parish. Like you're allowed to do that.
Yeah.
You know, with the bad architecture, but the good man who's the holy priest is doing his best. You're allowed to do that. I wonder if, I sometimes have this idea that we've abandoned the world and we all now live online, which is my explanation for why the real world sucks so much and why service is so bad. And wherever you go, it feels like it's terrible. But my joke, but I don't know if it's too far from the truth, is we don't live there anymore. Like we've all abandoned the world. We all now live here. We live in the internet. We don't live there.
Yeah.
That's why it sucks. No one's taking care of it. We don't need to take care of it because we live here. And I sometimes wonder, like when you live online in the religious sphere, you're getting the vibes of religion that give you a sense of religiosity and spirituality, like the long beards and the Gregorian chant and the Knights Templar, and like you have these vibes.
Yeah.
But then you go to like, you know, St. John's up the road and it's like you don't get it there. And so you get angry and you kind of retreat back into the quote-unquote real world, which is just the Matrix.
Yeah, completely. And all Gnostic groups, all heretics, the Reformation, all the rest of it were people that said, our little niche, our little group, we're the in crowd, we've got the proper interpretation, we'll tell you where it went wrong, we know the secret language, we know the truth, everyone else is wrong, join our little group and you'll be the really, really holy ones, away from those normies down the road.
Yeah. Why is that so appealing? I've asked this earlier, but why is that so appealing?
I don't know. I mean, I think a lot of people are, well, sometimes I think this is a slightly outrageous thought, but I'm going to share it anyway. Sometimes I just think a vast number of these people should just have become priests or religious, and they didn't. So all of that energy, because the era we're living, fewer people become priests and religious. So they become this sort of clericalized layperson and becomes an expert in kind of online factions and stuff like that. And a lot of them probably should have just taken vows of obedience. It's a slightly outrageous thing to think, but
no, I don't know.
I mean, a priest said to me once, I mean, he said, you know, just all these people were claiming to know all this kind of stuff and they'd looked into everything and they were sort of disagreeing with him. And he just said, well, you know, because people don't become priests anymore. You've all become experts in everything.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I got a good and holy priest back in Florida. His parish is a beautiful parish. He's such a good man, you know. And it's like, it's so easy to criticize. Like, why are they, you know, doing this or that? And you got no idea what it's like on the ground. Like, suppose you go to a random parish up the road here in Nashville, right? And suppose there's like an altar girl, you know.
Yeah.
And you go, why are you bloody doing that? Okay, first of all, you have no idea what's going on. Maybe the priest just inherited this parish. Maybe it would cause more harm than good to like kick her out for whatever reason. And so maybe you don't know this, but maybe the priest is holding like private sessions where people are only privately asked to be altar boys from now on. So he can, you know, like this pastoral thing. It's like, we're not sensitive to that as bystanders, as onlookers who are just demanding that our churches make us feel a certain way or be a certain
Definitely,
way.
yeah. And this is legal. I mean, legalism in its proper sense is to mistake the right practice for being intrinsically salvific in some way. So it's to say if things are not being done exactly rightly and perfectly in exactly the right way, then that's forfeiting the means of salvation in some way. And you know, you might have an altar girl wearing bright pink, shiny basketball boots. But what's on the altar?
Yeah.
You know, of course it annoys me. But what's on the altar?
Yeah.
Don't look at the basketball boots. Look at the altar.
Yeah, it's funny. I'm not really good at like getting annoyed and then correcting myself. I think that's what we got to do more of. I was sitting down for breakfast yesterday, and this woman was at a hotel, a couple of seats over. You know how people do this? They play stuff on their phones out loud.
Yeah.
I think they should be killed. I think we should actually not just excommunicate them, but like slaughter them right there.
I think that's a hermeneutic of charity. I think that's
maybe give it one warning, but then you're dead. We cut you off, head off. All right, that went sideways real quickly. I apologize. I don't mean any of that. But it's like, how many times do we correct ourselves for feeling irritated instead of correcting? We just correct the world, walk about judging everybody except ourselves.
Yeah. I mean, I'd like, I do think it's that slightly Franciscan thing, isn't it? There's people talking distractedly at Mass during the elevation. Do you think of all the times that you've turned your back on the Lord?
Exactly.
All the times you felt that text is more important than the host in the monstrance on the altar.
Yeah, or how disrespectful the crowds were to our blessed Lord as he hung on the cross.
Exactly.
And yet that took nothing away from the sacrifice he was making.
Exactly. I don't manage it. I'm not trying to pretend that I do this, but I occasionally read things in spiritual reading and stuff where I think that would have been the right response to those people that were annoying me.
Yeah.
Even if I didn't manage it myself.
Where do we go from here? I mean, as Catholics, like what happens next? What should we do? Like maybe we could let the hierarchy learn from Pope Francis, and maybe we could learn from the excesses that we committed. You know what I mean? It's like, what can we learn? What can you, a theologian, me, just a knuckleheaded podcaster, and everyone else watching, many of whom have YouTube channels, Facebook pages, Twitter accounts, and all sorts, like, what can we learn? Maybe we've already said this, but...
I don't know. I just think we need to be better listeners and less good talkers. And I think things are moving in the right direction as well. I mean, you must have seen all those statistics showing where the priests are at now. I mean, I teach seminarians. Well, there's been various surveys out there as showing that the general level of orthodoxy, conservatism, stroke traditionalism among priests is going up and up and up and up. So I remember when I was 30, which is longer ago than I'd care to remember, but I remember when I was 30 realising that there were no liberals my age or younger. They'd all gone. Disappeared. Completely gone. Everyone 30 and under was orthodox compared to the generation above them.
Yeah.
That has continued, and they're coming through. And the younger bishops we have where I live clearly formed in the JP2 Benedict XVI era. You can see that's coming through now.
Yeah.
So I think things can move in the right direction. Is why we have to be really careful about those who will take this moment of disruption and this generation which are in charge at the moment and turn around and want to just forsake the entire notion of Catholicity completely. That's why it's so dangerous, because it will change. The times are moving in the right direction. And actually, I was thinking at Mass this morning, actually, a lot of what was going on, I knew this was coming up. A lot of what I saw at the Mass was stuff which you didn't see 10 years ago.
I've been thinking about this. It's like if you use an analogy and say, after the council, a wound was inflicted to the church.
Yeah.
And you think of the church as a body. It's like the body feels like it's healing.
Yeah.
Just an objective observance of how things are today.
Yeah.
Women want a veil. They're not being told to. They want to.
Yeah.
Men and women are kneeling for the Eucharist, even when they're chided for it. They want to do that.
Yeah.
Even Franciscan University of Steubenville, which I think is an excellent university, all things considered, it's, you can't hold you can't hold the trads back there. And, I'm using trad in the sense that you and I would be trad. We wouldn't be as trad as people would like us to be. But they're kneeling, they're praying the Holy Rosary. Like the Rosary was something I never saw growing up.
Yeah.
No one prayed the Rosary. I was never taught about the Rosary. I never saw priests or nuns talk about it. Of course, as I got older, maybe they were doing it and I just wasn't aware of it, But you just started to see this interest and you never saw incense in the night. I didn't, So it's almost like this wound is you're seeing it heal.
I completely agree, and that's how I feel, which is why I find it really strange that people are turning around and saying, it's the Novus Ordo. The Novus Ordo is intrinsically deficient, intrinsically evil, and it's a problem because you see the Novus Ordo improving massively and becoming reverent, and you think there might come a time when we get proper rubrics and people can do it in that way that I was formed within it, happening reverently. Seems a really strange time now, with all this going on, as you've just articulated, now to turn around and say the whole post-conciliar church is doomed.
Yeah.
It's odd. The timing is very odd.
to be fair, there is a spectrum, right? And there are some people who are just angry blowhards. And then there are actually like really intelligent church historians who are writing really serious books on why we should return to the traditional Latin Mass. So I wouldn't want to personally, I wouldn't want to put them in the same bucket.
Sure.
But yeah, I mean, I agree with you.
Yeah. And I think we should return, I think that the traditional Latin Mass should be available without restriction.
I think if it were, it would slowly, it might slowly become the predominant Mass in the United States if it was not, if the boot would be lifted off the throat. Maybe I'm wrong. I could be completely wrong about that.
I mean, the two rights will have to come back together at some point.
The two what?
The two rights will have to come, well, the two forms of the one right.
That's right.
Will have to come back together at some point. We can't carry on with two like this. That was never
I see.
the intention. And that's what Summorum Pontificum opened the door to.
Yeah.
And that door has been shut temporarily, I hope and pray.
Yeah.
But the point is that the two should eventually become one somehow.
I wonder if after the council, if Sacrosanctum Concilium was actually implemented, like you said earlier, I'm sure there would be academics who would be upset about the changes this far in, but I really think most people wouldn't care. Maybe they should care, right? Maybe the changes were terrible. But as you say, I've been to a Novus Ordo, which was in Latin, ad Orientem, and it doesn't say much that I couldn't tell the difference because I'm not versed in these things. I wasn't raised with the Latin, so I don't know. But I just think there wouldn't be this backlash.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, in my parish, they do the old rite on a Saturday morning. And I wasn't able to go because one of my kids does sport on a Saturday morning, so I hadn't been able to go for ages. And I went, and I thought it would just be full of, loads of trads that don't normally come to the parish that I'd never seen before. Great big families and mantillas everywhere. It was all the usual parishioners.
Oh, yeah.
That would go to daily mass anyway.
Yeah.
And I said to the priest afterwards, I said, it's all the regulars are here. And he says, yeah, that's the way it should be. Rather than a different thing, a different cult kind of thing. A group coming together for this special thing. It was the same for everyone. I don't think for the average person in the pews really needs to worry too much about what the liturgical experts are trying to do and tinker around with the mass. These things grow organically. They grow naturally. This is the great travesty we're in when it comes to liturgy, is that organic, natural development has stalled. So you've got the old rite could never change. Imagine if anyone tried to change anything in it now. The whole thing would just splinter and
I think for a reason though, right? Like the reason is it's because of what they did do to it that we're on guard. I imagine traditionalists are on guard. Yeah. Hyper vigilant against any.
Yeah. But there is a view, held by people who are, I would say, completely sound and orthodox, that the error actually goes right back to Trent. With the Council of Trent, Pius V intervened over a degree of liturgical diversity, and it was a top-down thing that created this illusion that a pope can control the liturgy. And as Benedict XVI said, or implied in Summorum Pontificum, the liturgy is lord over the pope, not the pope lord over the liturgy. That's why that document was so important, because he left the rites as they are and liberated them so God can do what God needs to do to bring unity back to the church. And there will have to be liturgical unity at some point. It might not, it might be at the eschaton. And I'm sure at the marriage feast of the Lamb, our Lord will return. There'll be someone that doesn't like the chasuble or something, but, it will have to come back together. It can't carry on having the Latin rite in different usages.
Cardinal John Henry Newman is someone you've studied.
Yeah.
Why should people be interested in him? I mean, I know there's a lot of reasons, but for those who had just heard the name but aren't too familiar.
Yeah, I mean, St. John Henry Newman is just a massive inspirational figure. I mean, partly to me as an English Catholic.
Was he part of the reason you converted from Anglicanism?
He wasn't really. I was aware of him, but I only really started to appreciate him after I'd converted. I understood him a lot better. As an Anglican, he always had this slight air of suspicion as a sort of traitor because he'd converted. But he helped me understand really how to be English and Catholic insofar as the English national culture is so deeply formed by the Reformation, and it's so Protestant and quite profoundly anti-Catholic. And at the time...
In what sense is it profoundly anti-Catholic?
Through sort of deifying private judgment as our capacity to be... I mean, It's slightly difficult to imagine now with the whole freedom of speech thing, but the idea that you can be a free-born Englishman, use your own judgment, you can decide what's best for you. A strong suspicion of authority, overweening authority. A strong suspicion in the English national culture, a certain sense of reserve and discretion, a dislike of intense emotionalism. And you've got all the pathos of Baroque Catholicism, and
That's a Protestant thing, you think?
It's an English thing. It's
But-
English. The
but
Church
was
of
it
England
born
is
out
very.
of Protestantism? Is that what you're trying to say? Because I do find that interesting with the English being much more reserved.
Yeah. So, I think the Church of England bears the distinct form of Protestantism that is Anglicanism.
Okay.
Has a strong sense of reserve and discretion towards overweening emotionalism, wearing your heart on your sleeve. It's very much an Anglican thing, I suppose, rather than intrinsically Protestant.
Yeah.
But it would be associated with being sort of related to authority. Those that were very anti-Catholic in the 19th century would say what Newman and others are doing. They're whipping people up into this emotional frenzy.
Oh, okay.
And getting them to fast and to be celibate, because then you're weak and you're impressionable and they can have authority over you. So the two.
It'd be funny to look. It'd be funny if you compared what an English emotional frenzy would look like compared to certain places in America. It'd be quite reserved.
Yeah, absolutely. I would like the English emotional frenzy. It would look very much like this.
Yeah, you're like, I'm going off right now.
I'm doing it right now. Yeah. So yeah, Newman sort of did. When Newman converted, the idea of someone converting from Anglicanism to Rome was almost unheard of. An incredibly controversial thing to do. I mean, it was Gladstone, who became Prime Minister. He said when he found out about it, he staggered around the room like a drunken man and fell over. And after Newman converted, there was a massive wave of converts. The biggest wave ever of Anglicanism to Rome. So bigger than 92, when the Anglicans started ordaining women, there was a massive wave. Bigger than the Ordinariate. Those 5 years after Newman converted, there was an epidemic of conversion, to the point that it became part of our culture for people to convert in that way. And we've got Newman to owe for that. But he also did really important work, I think, in doctrinal development. When I was talking about the church being universal over time, not just space.
Yeah.
At the bottom of that, I've got Newman's understanding of doctrinal development.
So let's talk about doctrinal development, because I think a lot of Protestants hear that phrase and they worry that it's just the Catholic Church's way of instituting whatever it wants to institute. Like, in other words, I don't know, maybe in the year 3000 we'll decide that St. Joseph was assumed into heaven, and someone will say, we don't have any relics of him, or something like that. And so isn't it rather dangerous, doctrinal development? What is it anyway, and why should we be okay with it?
Well, I would say to someone in that position, as a Protestant, do you believe in the doctrine of the Trinity?
Yep.
That was formulated in 325 and 381, Nicaea and Constantinople. So it's formulated in the 4th century. So it took, 350 years to define the doctrine of the Trinity. Nearly all Protestants believe in it. I had a very good friend, Southern Baptist. He said the slogan of his church was "No creed but the Bible." I said, "Do you believe in the doctrine of the Trinity?" He said, "Yes." I said, "Go figure." So between the time of the New Testament being written and the doctrine of the Trinity being codified in the 4th century is a process of unfolding, greater conceptual clarification, challenging heretical ideas that come up. Maybe Christ isn't fully divine, that kind of thing. So he shares a divine nature, so the Father has a divine nature. Well, then what does the Spirit do? People experience the Spirit, the way the Spirit transforms people's lives. The religious orders are founded, or the religious life, is founded by St. Basil in his book on the Holy Spirit. This all happens at that time. And people realize this divine nature must be shared by Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. And they realize there are 3 persons in one nature. And they realize this is the best and indeed the only way to interpret what the New Testament's about. The doctrine isn't in the New Testament.
Right, and that's what I was going to say. I bet the Protestant would say, I only believe it because it's in the Bible.
Yeah.
It's like, I don't believe you that you would have come to the acceptance of the Trinity unless it weren't for the tradition that you were given in your Protestant upbringing.
The triune God is in the Bible, but the doctrine, 3 persons in one nature, that's not there. That's the only way to make sense of the Bible, with conceptual consistency. Okay. That's what the doctrine is, the proper outworking of it, but it takes centuries to be outworked into full conceptual clarity. That's what doctrinal development is. It's an unfolding of the Christ who is the same yesterday, today, and tomorrow, unfolding in history through a process of ongoing explication and more detailed understanding of all the different angles of the different things happening in the life of the church and God's revelation in Christ. Yep. So the revelation remains unchanged. It remains definitive. It cannot be surpassed.
Okay.
But it takes centuries and centuries for people to appreciate that the Virgin Mary must have been conceived without the stain of original sin, which is defined in 1851 or something.
Right. And isn't it important to say that prior to 325, the church believed that Christ was divine?
Yes.
And prior to Pope Pius IX, right, the church believed that Mary was immaculate.
Yeah.
But it's so that's important to point out. Otherwise, people think that we didn't know any of these things.
No, exactly, and that's often misunderstood about development. So it's what's implied in what is known. So from very early on, people celebrated the birthday of Mary, September the 8th, traditionally. Now, according to the tradition of the Church, you do not celebrate the birthday of a saint because they are not yet redeemed by baptism.
Hey.
You celebrate the birthday of John the Baptist because he met Christ in the womb and accepted Christ and danced for joy in the womb. So the question is, well, was Mary born? Was she born a sinner destined for hell?
Interesting.
So there's this ancient folk tradition of celebrating her birthday. It takes centuries to work out, well, maybe she was not born in sin.
Right.
And actually, how does this all work out? And there's lots of disagreement, and we get there in the end.
Yeah.
So doctrinal development is an unfolding, an explication of that one truth, which is all there in Nuce. So Newman says in the Essay on Development of Catholic Doctrine, he compares, it's a nice metaphor, he compares an acorn to an oak tree.
Okay.
He says, if you'd never seen the oak tree and you'd only seen the acorn, you say to a child, you describe what an oak tree is like. The child would never believe you that the oak tree could come from the acorn.
Yep.
But the acorn can only end as the oak tree. The oak tree is the Catechism. The acorn is the New Testament. They might not look alike, but when you see how they intertwine with each other, that's the destination of it. So it's a process of unfolding, explication, greater conceptual clarification, and in no way suggestive of change or novelty in the superficial sense.
I wanted to point out that unless I'm misunderstanding, I think St. Augustine said, now with the exception of the Holy Virgin Mary, in regard to whom, out of respect for the Lord, I do not propose to have a single question raised on the subject of sin. You're familiar with this text?
Yeah.
The point isn't that the church fathers are infallible, but the point is just to say that, again, it wasn't simply about, as you said, just the birthday. Like there's a lot going on. I just say that for those who are like skeptical that that's not enough to convince them. And we're not trying to convince you right now. It's just to say that I had Dr. Bergsma here recently. I like the way he put it. He talked about turning the dial and getting more and more resolution.
Yeah.
Isn't that good?
Yeah.
So it's like fuzzy, like you know what that thing is.
Yeah.
And then over the
That's
process.
exactly right.
Especially through disagreements, say, like when something's called into question.
Yeah.
Like one day, this is the example Bergsma gave, if one day in the future someone proposes whether or not we should baptize robots, we might end up having an infallible statement about something.
Yeah.
And it wasn't because it took the church 3,000 years to know whether or not we should or shouldn't do whatever.
Yeah. No, I think that's exactly right. And Pope Leo has said he'll be doing stuff on digital technology. His encyclical will probably be related to AI in some way. This is the road it's going. You know, that's what we need. They're the answers we need. And doctrinal development is really important because it shows the church responding. I don't mean dialoguing or accommodating the world. I mean responding to the world and in a lively relationship with the world, able to correct and transmute stuff coming from the world. So with that formal definition of the doctrine of the Trinity, elements of Greco-Roman philosophy came into the Nicene Creed, consubstantiality, ousia, so on and so forth. Newman describes this as a process of assimilation, through which the church, knowing that there is one dogmatic truth, is able to assimilate elements of truth from the world outside the church, transmute them, correct them, and bring them under the rule of what he calls a new sovereign, who is Christ himself. Now, this must happen with the modern age in some way. There might be more correction, more transmutation than there was in the ancient world. But don't forget, lots of these philosophies that influenced early doctrine were coming from the pagan world. I mean, Augustine says some of these ideas, if we weren't using them in Christianity, they'd only be good for the worship of demons. And this will happen in the modern age too. This connects with what we're talking about. So doctrinal development is an ongoing organic process. And elements of the contemporary world will have to be corrected, transmuted, and assimilated into the development of doctrine. And we'll end up with something like an infallible teaching on the baptizing of robots, which I hope doesn't happen.
As we wrap up, I don't know, where do you write online somewhere? Where can people find you or learn more about the stuff you're doing?
Well, I do a few pieces for a magazine in England called The Critic. I comment on a few things to do with religion in there from time to time. I've got a book coming out next year, God willing, with Emmaus Academics. It'll be published over here in the States, called Modern Thought Baptized.
And what's the point of the book?
It's a study of the theology of Joseph Ratzinger.
Oh, wonderful.
From his period as an academic.
Let me know when it comes out. I'd love to get it and promote it.
Yeah, great. Good. Yeah, that should be coming out next year. Modern Thought Baptized, Joseph Ratzinger and the History of Ideas. Lots of stuff related to what we talked about today.
Yeah. And you teach where?
I teach at St Mary's University, Twickenham, southwest London. So if you're ever in London, anyone out there, feel free to pop down to Twickenham and argue about the Novus Ordo with me.
Yes. Well, good luck. Thanks for being on the show.
Pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I cannot believe you made it all the way to the end of this interview. The fact that you did shows me that you might enjoy a lot of the stuff that we do here at Pints with Aquinas. So please click subscribe, click the bell button. We really appreciate it.